So I am going to hand the mic over to Chris. He can share a little bit about his background, where he's from. If you also want to hear more about him, Chris has been a guest on the Community Cats podcast, so you can always go onto our website and put doobert.com in the search bar, and you can hear him chat in a podcast that we did probably about a year and a half ago or so. All right, Chris, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Stacy. Good morning, everybody. Glad to have all of you with us this morning, and glad everybody's already had their coffee. Lots of stuff to cover, so I'll just briefly touch on who I am. So that's a picture of me, and there's another picture of me with Doobert. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Roy. I'm the creator of Doobert, which is a custom-built software platform that started primarily for animal rescue transport. And Doobert was a cat. He was an amazing cat. And so the Doobert.com solution is actually in his name. And that's where the name came from. So there's a nice story out online that you can go check out if you'd like to learn more about Doobert. So let's talk about transport. It was very interesting. I was watching the poll, about 50-50, about 50% of the people have already done transport or have an active transport program, and the other 50% haven't. So hopefully this will be some good information to get you started. So feel free to ask questions, and of course, all of this will be available to you guys afterwards. So I'm really excited today to be talking and focusing on cats in particular, because I think, like a lot of people, many of us never really could imagine the day when we'd be transporting cats, particularly between organizations. And so when we think about the reasons that we're transporting cats, there's a lot of different types of transport that is needed. So one, probably a pretty common one, is a TNR program support, right? So moving the animals from the clinic and back out to the field, there's always a need for transporters in that between organizations. So as I mentioned, there's a lot more shelter to shelter, shelter to rescue, and even rescue to rescue transports that are taking place with cats, which is a great thing to see. There's always medical, so local rides when an animal needs to go to the vet, anything like that, to a foster home, and then of course to an adopter when the forever home can't come to you. So there's lots of reasons that you would want to start a transport program, and what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the things that are important, and then I'll even show you a couple of screens in Doobert just to kind of give you some ideas how technology can help make this easier for you. All right, so 3 things we're going to focus on here for Transporting 101. First is laws and regulations. We're going to kind of cover who the people are that are involved, and then we'll walk you through the 10 steps to a successful rescue relay transport. So let's talk first about laws and regulations, because we always want to make sure that we're staying within the law and complying with the law. There's a number of different legal things to keep in mind when you are doing transport. There's the USDA requirements. So the USDA is a federal body that has passed laws that govern the transport of animals, all different types of animals, cats, dogs, cows, horses, you name it. They've got it very well specified, from the size of the crate to the amount of airflow in the crate to how long they can go without food and water, all those other kinds of things. So it's very important that you are familiar with what those requirements are. And we'll point out where you can get that information. There's state import rules. So in addition to the federal rules about doing transport, each state has their own import rules. Some states are more restrictive than others, and some are pretty easy. So pretty much every state, you'll hear us talk about a certificate of veterinary inspection, also called a health cert. People often call it a health cert, but the certificate of veterinary inspection is something that pretty much every state requires. And it's important for you to make sure you have that, particularly when you're moving animals between states. So let's kind of jump into some of this stuff. And I'm not going to overwhelm you with all of the legalese, but it is important that you recognize that this stuff is out there. And again, I'll show you where some of the resources are for you to find good information. So as I mentioned, the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, is the one that governs this aspect of it. So we have a hot link in here. If you go to the APHIS website, you can actually click on the state you're traveling to, and it'll show you that information. Within Doobert, and when I get to the system, I'll show you that, we've actually built a resource map by state. So you can actually click on the state, and we'll show you what the requirements are. And then there's a really good list out here from Pets LLC, which is a commercial company, but they have some really good requirements that are pulled from these same things. So it's just important for you to recognize that this stuff exists. And just to give you an example of what we're talking about when there's laws and rules governing this. So this is an example of just a state requirement. And again, it can differ by state. So it is important to know where you're going from and to. But primarily, these are in place to try and prevent disease outbreaks. So you can see that for dogs, free from contagious disease, did not originate in an area under quarantine, and then they've been vaccinated against rabies within 6 months. Cats, again, free from contagious disease, did not, originate in an area under quarantine, vaccinated against rabies, or if they're under 3 months of age, they could be admitted without rabies in quarantine. So again, state by state, there's some really specific things. I'll give you a couple examples. Massachusetts is a pretty restrictive state. You actually have to work with a organization that's allowed to import animals. Colorado is another one that a couple of years ago passed some of the most stringent transport requirements. So if you're transporting into Colorado, you again have to be working with a licensed and registered organization. So these rules are changing. We do our best on Joubert to try and keep you updated with what's going on, but always important to pay attention to these. So the next thing that is always required, you'll hear when people are doing transports, they'll talk about the paperwork. And one of the most important things in terms of the paperwork is this little form here called the CVI Health Certificate of Veterinary Inspection. This is an actual example of one. Every state can have a little bit variation in terms of the form, but they basically are testing to the same thing. Most of these forms are still in triplicate, meaning the vet keeps a copy, they send a copy into the state, and then you get a copy, which usually goes along with the animals that are being transported. And what it is it's indicating that a vet has inspected that animal, has seen that animal physically, and is certifying that there's no communicable diseases, no contagious diseases that the pet, the animal, is currently displaying. So the vet is essentially attesting that this animal is safe for transport to another location. And the reason these are important is, again, remember that part of the state vet's job is to try and prevent disease outbreak. And nobody, I believe, wants to see that happen. So we all need to do our part to make sure that the animals are seen by a vet. The certificates of veterinary inspection are generally good for 30 days. There are a couple of exceptions where it could be as few as 14 days. But generally, you can get these from any veterinarian, any shelter vet can issue them. It's just a form that they're filling out saying that they've inspected the animal. It is required for every animal, but you can see they can actually put multiple animals on one form. All right, so that kind of covers just the overall rules and regulations. So that's the stuff to be aware of. Again, I'll show you some of the links if we get a second. I'll show you some of the links that you can get some of this information pretty easily. Now let's talk about when you're doing one of these programs, who are the people involved? Because I think sometimes for those of you that have not done a transport before, not been involved in transport programs, you may not be as familiar with some of the terms and some of the roles that people are playing. So we're going to talk about some of these. So the first one is the transport coordinator. So the transport coordinator is often called the TC, just for short. The transport coordinator is the person that's essentially overall responsible for pulling together this transport. In this case, what we're talking about is a rescue relay transport. So it's a volunteer-based transport. And the TC is the one that's kind of start to finish, they're the one coordinating all of these different things. So they're working with the shelter rescue group, both on the sending and on the receiving end, to make sure that the paperwork is there, that they've got photos and weight, so that they can share that information with the volunteers that are then signing up to be a part of that particular route. The volunteers can be drivers or pilots. There's literally thousands and thousands of people out there that do animal rescue transport. On Joubert, we've got over 22,000 volunteers now signed up that any organization can automatically tap into. So the volunteers are just that. They are people that are choosing to participate in a transport and helping to move the animals to where they need to go. Again, both dogs and cats, there are rabbits and ferrets, and believe it or not, reptiles and birds that also get transported. So it is a very common thing for it to take place. A third role that you might have, if the TC is lucky enough, They might have a third person that's a transport monitor. There's quite a few transport coordinators out there that literally will manage 10 to 20 transports in a given week, and trying to keep track of which volunteers and which transport and communicate. So the transport monitor is someone that's almost like an assistant, and generally what they're doing is the day of the transport, they're checking in with volunteers, making sure things are progressing well, answering questions. There's always something that's going to happen on a transport. Somebody's going to be delayed or somebody gets lost, something like that. So a transport monitor is a good person to have as well, because they'll help the TC to make sure that everything is running as smoothly as possible. So when we talk about a transport coordinator, anybody can be a transport coordinator. There is no legal requirement, there is no educational requirement, there is no requirement really. So what we try to focus on are what are the things that a good transport coordinator does. And there's three things. There's the people skills, there's the organization skills, and then there's the flexibility. So if you're just starting your transport program and you're finding an organization to work with, and now you're ready to start doing your transports, it's important to identify who is going to be the coordinator for your transports, whether it be yourself, one of your staff, one of your volunteers. It could be pretty much anybody. And to find the best person, you really want somebody that is a people person. There are some people that are better than others in terms of understanding people and just empathizing with people, socializing, communicating, all those other kinds of things. So you want somebody that's going to be good, because they're going to get lots of questions. They're going to get the same questions over and over again, despite having put out all this information in a run sheet or something like that. Your TC, you're going to want them to be very, very organized, because they might be managing 10 to 30 volunteers on a particular transport. So trying to keep track of who's driving what leg and who's got what restriction and where your backups are and where the problems might be, all those other kinds of things. If you're managing more than one transport at a time, you can imagine it can get pretty crazy. That's part of the reason why I created Dubert, and you'll see that Dubert actually will help you. We've been told by TCs that they can double or triple the number of transports they can coordinate, because the Dubert software takes a lot of the manual work off of them. You want your TC to be flexible. So things are going to change. One of the things that always happens with transport is it never starts and ends, on time. Oftentimes the animals that you plan, sometimes at the last minute they have to be pulled. They didn't pass their CDI. They could have gotten adopted. Who knows? So there's always going to be things that happen. There's going to be weather. I mean, right now in the U.S., I mean, there's snowstorms all over the place, right? In the spring and fall, there's often thunderstorms. So there's football games that can deter people. So there's all sorts of things that could happen that the TC is really the one that everybody's reaching out to. So your TC has got to be flexible. They've got to be able to figure stuff out, right? Be the one that gets on the computer, gets on Google Maps, figures out where the best location is, can navigate people to find one another if they're lost. All right, so we've kind of just covered now a little bit of the laws. We've covered who the people are, right? So who you need to get to help you to build one of these. Now let's talk a little bit more in detail about a specific rescue relay transport. So there's 10 steps, and we're going to walk through each one of these in more detail. But the first thing is to work with the sending or receiving shelter looking to initiate the transport. Now there's an implied assumption in this. If you're working with the sending or receiving shelter or rescue, that means you already know who they are. And one of the first steps, as anybody knows, is you need to find a partner to work with. So if you're a source shelter and you've got animals that you need to transfer out, you need to find a destination. And if you're a destination and you're looking to bring animals in, you need to find a source. And one of the other things that you'll see that Dubert does is we help you to find those organizations that you want to work with. It's important that you work out a relationship, establish a good relationship with that other organization. What are they trying to accomplish? What are you trying to accomplish? What is going to make this relationship successful? Next is you're going to have to determine which animals are going, where they're going, and on what day. You got to plot the route and break it into legs, then post it. Then you got to manage the sign up, questions, changes. Obviously communicate with the volunteers, confirm the transport is ready, and then monitoring that transport the day of, ensuring everything happens. And then one of the important things about this is transports are great opportunities to showcase the life-saving work that you do. So helping to aggregate the pictures and to share with the volunteers keeps them motivated and wanting to do them, and obviously getting ready for the next transport. So if we break this down a little bit, when the first step is working with the sending and receiving organization, looking to initiate that transport. So we talked already about making sure that we follow the law, right? Transporting within the state, there are some states that require certain things even within the state, but certainly across state lines, you need to have that CVI or health certificate, it's sometimes called. But basically it's just saying the animal is healthy enough to travel. You want to make sure to plan ahead. When you're doing these transports, particularly when you're relying on volunteers, it's not a good idea to wait to the last minute. We often get people that'll email us and say, hey, I need to do a transport, 3,000 miles and we need to leave tomorrow. It's like, well, you're not going to get 30, 40, 50 volunteers to sign up in a span of 12 hours. So generally people will ask me, they'll say, how far in advance? I usually recommend 7 to 10 days. So aim for that, 2-week time frame to plan ahead to post your transport so that you give volunteers time to sign up, you have time to promote your transport, make others aware of it. You should always have a plan. Is this a ground or an aviation transport? As a pilot myself, and one of the reasons I founded Joubert, one of the things that is difficult for people that are not pilots to understand is that pilots are very affected by the weather. And different pilots have different skill sets, they have different planes with different equipment, so the weather can play real havoc. And at the last minute, we might have to cancel out. Not something we would like to do, but it does happen. So making sure that you have a plan as you're figuring this out from the very beginning. If you're going to use pilots, great, but what's your backup plan? All right, next we talked about determining which animals go where and on which day. So once you've established that relationship with that organization, you in this case, if you're the destination, you've probably got specific animals that you want. And they might have a pool of animals that they're looking to transfer. So there might be some negotiating that you guys need to do together. If there's particular animals that they're trying to get out that are harder to place, you might need to help them by taking 1 or 2 of those harder to place ones in addition to the easier to place ones. That's what's going to go a long way in establishing a good relationship. So once you've determined now which animals, are all the animals going to go to the same location? Are they going to stop at different places? So one of the things you'll see with transports is they can be aggregated, so you could have multiple sources that meet up and they kind of combine, or they could have animals that go to multiple destinations on the other end. So thinking about that early on is really important. Will an overnight location be needed? For the longer distance transports, and we do see transports that are multiple days, thousands of miles, what ends up happening is the volunteers generally drive about an hour each. So you figure you can get somewhere between 8 and 10 hours worth of driving in a day. But then the animals are going to need a place to bunk for the night. So you need kind of like a temporary foster. A lot of times the volunteer drivers or pilots will be happy to be the foster overnight, but sometimes not. So it's something to consider. The longer the distance, you might have to have an overnight leg, which makes it a little bit more complicated because now you're going across 2 days and you've got to get lots more logistics planned out. Where are the best handoffs along that route? Sometimes when you're planning a transport using Google Maps or something like that, the most efficient route on Google may not be the best route for your transport, just given where people are, where volunteers are. So it's always important to think about what is the best route and where are the places that people are going to need to meet. We find people meet at, generally at sometimes rest areas, but more often at restaurants and gas stations that are just off the highway. Next is to plot your transport. So again, I'll show you later how Joubert does a lot of this automatically, but if you wanted to do this manually, you certainly can. You would use something like Google Maps or another mapping tool to arrive at that 60 to 90 mile leg, give or take, just really depends on the area. And you're always going to want to plan time, handoff time between the volunteers. So you don't want leg one starting at 10 and ending at 11, and leg 2 starting at 11 and ending at 12, right? You're going to need to provide some time in there for volunteers to take pictures, you know, particularly if they're dogs, be able to let them go potty and get a drink of water, things like that. You're going to want to help find suitable locations or ask the volunteers to propose. This is something that's very common. People will just ask the volunteers, hey, what's a good place for you guys to meet? And then you as the transport coordinator are just making sure that you understand where they are. Checking for construction or closure. It's a lot easier these days to do this now with great tools like Waze and Google Maps. They can show you all those kinds of things. So, but it is important to make sure that you're always checking. We find particularly during the football season, right? The college football season or the NFL, there's always delays. Just on a Saturday and Sunday is the most common days that people are doing transport, and those are the days that these games take place. And you don't really think about it, but when 50,000 people are letting out of an arena, they're going to muck up traffic for miles and miles around. So you always want to be thinking about traffic. Then you're going to post your transport so that it notifies the volunteers. As I mentioned, Dubert does this automatically. There's also Facebook groups out there, all sorts of different Facebook groups. There's one for every single state that's managed by a group of people. And then there's different groups, regions, and pretty much just wherever you're trying to go. If you wanted to go from Florida up to New York, if you type Florida transport group, you'll find a group. You'll find a New York transport group. You might find a Northeast transport group. So just, you know, kind of poke around, use Facebook. You can find a lot of these different places. There are people that still post to Yahoo groups, if you can believe that. Yahoo groups is still used by a lot of different groups as well. So this is where people are posting to find those volunteers to sign up for those legs now that you've broken down. Then you're going to manage the sign up. Again, Dubert does this automatically, but you're going to need to be that point of contact, right? As at TC for what's going on. You know, people are often going to ask, hey, can we go from here to here? Can we shorten this leg? Can we go, you know, go further, whatever it might be. People are going to ask about the animals. They want to know, what am I transporting? What's the story? What's the situation? Do you have any pictures? We found with Dubert that probably the transports that fill the fastest are the ones that have great photos of the animals and they have a great story. So they're talking about how the animals are either coming from a shelter, going to a rescue, or maybe to an adopter. Whatever their situation is, the better you tell the story and the more pictures, the much faster you're going to get volunteers to opt in to help. All right, so then communicating with the volunteers. So once you've created your transport and you've posted it, it's something that is, you know, sometimes people expect that they just post it and it's just going to magically fill. It takes a little bit of marketing. So you're going to want to be posting things on Facebook. Again, Dubert will post it to our volunteers, but you're still going to want to share things on Facebook. You're still going to want to share it on your pages. You're still going to want to network with other people to try and get the volunteers. And then you're going to confirm the transport's ready to execute. So you'll hear a term called run sheet. I've called it out here. A run sheet is basically something that is like a Word document or a Google Doc with all of the legs and all of the volunteers information that you're sending to the volunteers so that they know how to contact each other. On the day of the transport, they might need the cell phone of the other person. They want to be reminded of where the meeting location is going to be, all those other kinds of things. So in step 7, when you're confirming the transport, you're making sure everybody's got all the contact information, that everybody's ready to go, and that you've got a backup plan, because there are things that happen sometimes with volunteers. They've got lives, and we've had instances where cars break down or literally people get in accidents, emergencies happen. So always be thinking about what your backup plan is. And then for the remaining 3 steps here, monitoring the day of the transport. We've talked a little bit about that. TCs start Facebook messenger groups. They'll start texting groups to keep people apprised of the schedule and how things are progressing. Always make sure to aggregate the pictures and help share the pictures, because that's what keeps volunteers engaged. And then do a postmortem. Get ready to reflect on what worked well, what didn't work well, and get ready for the next transport. There's really no limitation to the number of transports that you can do. It's just about getting the number of volunteers to sign up to get those transports filled. All right, so I wanted to leave a few minutes to kind of walk through a couple of things and show you kind of what Dubert does to help you with your transport program, to make some of this simple, because I know there's a lot of information, there's a lot of stuff that we've thrown at you. but want to try and show you that we've automated some of this to make it easier for you. So as Stacy mentioned in the intro, if you just go to doobert.com, it's called out here. It's free. You can sign up your organization. You can have volunteers sign up there as well. But what we do is we help with some of this stuff. So we help you to find partners, either source or destination organizations. So you can be either or both. You can create volunteer transports, unlimited. You can create local transports. So oftentimes we've talked a lot here about creating longer distance transports, but an effective transport program could also involve local transport. So the same volunteers might just be that one person that's coming to pick up an animal, take them to an adoption event, take them to a foster home, whatever it might be. One of the things we've tried to do in Doobert is we've built a tool that you can actually view other transports, right? And then you can actually request to join somebody else's transport. So we're trying to make it easy to maximize the capabilities out there so you can find transports so we can get these animals moved. So you can book a seat on an existing transport and even allow other people to book a seat on yours. So Doobert has two sides. We've talked a lot more about the organization side, but for volunteers, they can sign up again for free. They can manage their profile. They can decide how they want to engage, and volunteers are always choosing to opt in when a transport comes their way. So Doobert, one of the first things we do is we help you to find new matches. And one of the things that was really important to me when I created Doobert was we wanted to make sure that this tool was limited to rescues and shelters, right? We were not interested in trying to transport people's pets because we really have a passion for rescue animals. So every organization on Doobert does have to apply. It's a short application process, but we actually do verify every single organization to do the best that we can to verify that they are a legitimate animal shelter or animal rescue. You don't have to be a 501c3. Certainly that makes it easier for us to verify. But particularly with rescue groups, we do check references. We're checking with other organizations in your area to see if they've heard of you. We're trying to keep the tool set safe so that you can rely on it and know that the other organizations that are on Doobert have all been checked as well. So within Doobert, we talked about, it's kind of hard to see the screenshots, but you can actually set up your organization to indicate the types of animals and quantity of animals that you're able to transfer out and in. So you can actually turn on indicators to other organizations that say, look, we're looking to transfer cats in or transfer dogs in these particular sizes and types, or that these are the animals that we have that we're looking to transfer out so that other people can actually view them and then request to kind of partner with you. And then we've got capabilities for you to search for partner organizations, and you can actually plot them on a map and reach out to them and say, hey, look, we found you on Doobert. We'd like to work with you. What are you guys trying to accomplish? What are we trying to accomplish? And let's see if our goals align. So once you find the partner you want to work with, we've talked a lot about the rescue relay transport, which is great for longer distance transports. But as I mentioned, there's also local rides that can be used. So works very similar, except for it's just one leg, one volunteer. And Doobert will automatically send out emails to our volunteers and even text messages we send out for local rides because they're often more urgent situations. We also have some specialized transports in Doobert. So we've recruited a bunch of airline employee volunteers. And because airline employees can fly for free, often they will take smaller animals. So it's not possible to take a Mastiff or a St. Bernard, but they can take smaller animals, cats, puppies, small dogs, because they bring them actually in the cabin. And these people they'll spend their days off using their flight benefits to help transport animals. So it's another option. And then the last one is if you're listening and you're a shelter organization or an organization that has a van, you can actually indicate to Doobert where you're driving. And if you want, we'll help you to try and get reservations for your transport. So let's just say you're planning to drive and go pick up 20 animals, but your van has capacity of 30. We'll actually list that extra 10 spaces and show people where that route is going and try and help them to contact you if they're looking to get an animal along that same route. So we're trying to raise awareness because there's transports happening all over the country. We're trying to do whatever we can to make it easy for you guys to find the transports that you're looking for. I mentioned that search like Expedia, and this is the tool, again, that's in Dubert. So one of the things you can do is you can actually say, we're trying to go from here to here in this date range, and Dubert will list all the transports that qualify. And will tell you either if it's a transport that you can reserve a spot on, or if it's just somebody that you need to contact and say, how can we, can you possibly take another animal? So what we're trying to do is not tell you who you have to work with. We're trying to give you the options so that you can find the transports that you want, the organizations you want to work with. And then I mentioned that, we actually even have a reservation system in here. So for, if you wanted to, you can make it so that other organizations could book an animal. We did this also to try and bring the commercial transporters. There are a lot of commercial transporters out there that sometimes are good options, particularly with special needs dogs or special situations, urgent cases. So we're trying to help bring them into the system as well, so that you have that visibility that, those transports are out there. All right, so that's kind of the end of my PowerPoint spiel. So I'm going to pause for just a second to see, Kristen, if there's any questions that I need to address. Otherwise, I was going to jump in and show a couple of things in the system to kind of give people a feel for how it works.
Stacy has been monitoring the questions, so we'll give her a chance to hop on and give you some of those.
Yep, sorry, I was digging around for my unmute button. Just a couple, there's just a couple questions that came across. One question was about, are the CVI forms necessary for transfers within the state, like a municipal shelter to a nonprofit that are in the same state or the same city?
Yeah, great question. The answer is generally no. There are a couple of states, and I off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly which one. There's a couple where it's not necessarily clear, but generally, if you're transporting within the state, within the city, you don't need to have that CVI because it's within that state.
Okay, great. And then I have a question. Is Dubert, is this like software only available for groups in the United States? We have several groups that are tuned in that are from outside the country, as well up in Canada, as well as all around the world.
Sure. No, that's a great question. So currently Dubert is set up to work in the US and Canada, and we're actively in the process of enabling India, and we're working with some groups in Australia and the UK that have expressed interest as well. So anybody, if you're listening from another country that I haven't listed, or even from one that I have, we'd be happy to work with you. Just reach out and contact us, and we'll help you get it set up.
Excellent. Got a question. What's the cost to join or use the software?
There is no cost. It's free. It's not, and Dubert is there to try and help rescues and shelters connect with the volunteers. So it's free.
I'm not sure. Well, I guess, I don't know. I'll let you interpret this question. Can a regular person that's not a pilot volunteer for air transport?
Regular person that's not a pilot volunteer for, I think what I'm guessing the person is kind of asking is if they're taking a flight, right? Going on vacation or something like that.
Okay.
If that's the question, it's a little bit more difficult. I think you've probably seen lately the airlines have been cracking down on people with their emotional support animals, so it's a little bit more difficult. It's possible, but it's probably not a really viable alternative, so we haven't really made it for people to sign up that way.
Okay. This person is asking, I live on a state border. My veterinarian is reluctant to issue a health certificate for adoptions that are only 15 minutes away, but across the state line. I'd like to confirm to her that this is required. If it is, could you provide more guidance?
Sure. So one of the things I was going to point out, and I'll walk through in a second how to get signed up, but once you're in as an organization, we have this resources tab. And on this resources tab, we have this state rules map. And what this does is I actually had somebody research state by state. So if I just click on Wisconsin where I am, and we pulled in the information from the state's website for what is required. So you can see we've pulled it in, we've provided a link to, you know, Wisconsin in this case, and then we've made these infographics to kind of show you what's required. So what I would recommend is go to the state, whatever state that person's in, and pull up that state, you know, requirements, right? So you can see in Wisconsin, this is the actual, you know, page. Here's an example, right? So Wisconsin has an exceptions, imports that do not require CVI, and they give you specific things that it's, you know, not required for. So I would start on that state page and then basically point that out to the vet to say, listen, this is what's required. It's particularly if you're on the state line, it gets a little bit tricky, right? Because you're now having to cross the state border, and then pretty much in every case, that's always a requirement.
Okay, everybody's saying thank you, and you're totally understanding the questions. So you wanted to have some time to give folks a little tour around something else that you had, is that true?
Yeah, if I can just take just a couple minutes. So if you come out to Joubert, right, everybody was asking how to sign up, click the I want to sign up, and then there's a My Organization button. So really, really simple. Volunteers would obviously click the Just Me, and we facilitate them through, and you as an organization just come through and create your profile this way. As I mentioned, there's a short kind of profile setup just so we can learn about your organization and we can go do some due diligence and keep Joubert safe. But we get organizations approved really, really quickly. Once you're approved and you log in, this is essentially what you'll see in Joubert right now. We're working to simplify things because we're always adding more functions and things like that. So it may seem a little overwhelming, but if you start just by looking at the tabs, we've got transport, we've got animals, we've got partners, and then I mentioned the resources tab. The partners tab is obviously where you can find new partners you want to work with. One of the cool things, or I think one of the cool things is every organization can actually import their animals into Joubert. We've connected with all of the shelter management software. We're still working on PetPoint, but we can import from Shelter Love, Shelter Buddy, Shelter Manager, and Adopt a Pet. And soon from PetPoint, and then you can actually indicate which animals. So in this case, if I was working with this partner and I look at the animals that they've indicated they want to make available to transfer, I can scroll down and see literally real time which animals are available to transfer from their particular organization. So what's cool about this is it allows you to find new partners, see their animals, and that's kind of the whole purpose of that. I will also point out on our resources tab, we have what we call a supply and demand map. And if I can zoom in here a little bit, it makes it a little easier to see. But I'm in my sandbox, so that's why there's not that many pins. But the idea of the supply and demand map is that every organization can indicate if they're sending or receiving or both. And what we do is we then turn this particular pin on and we list the information that you provided so that other organizations can visually see either down the road or across the country particular organizations maybe that they want to go work with. So there's that resource under the resources tab. Animal tab is pretty self-explanatory where you can import the profiles and then obviously transport. And so I'm going to just quickly walk you through, let me show you local ride real quick just because it's easy. Local rides, you pick the start and end times. You can actually create favorite rides. You quickly attach the animals and literally you hit publish, and then Joubert will automatically text and email the appropriate volunteers to be a part of that particular transport, and then they'll be able to opt in. And then a rescue relay transport, I'll just copy a previous one here, do this quicker. So you'll see you're always telling Joubert what is the starting and ending date of your transport. And you can copy previous transports. Every transport is a unique number, but you'll see we can give the transport a name, right? Pickup, drop-off date, sending and receiving, where's it going from and to, the story of the passengers and the animals, obviously. So you can pick those from your organization, things like that. I'm just going to move through quickly because I know I'm pressed for time. I missed my own receiving organization. One of the things Joubert has is we've got auto split functionality, so we'll automatically split routes into legs for you, or you can obviously do that yourself. Everything in Dubert automatically gets plotted on Google Maps so that your route is plotted, right? You can see every leg is actually color-coded automatically. And what happens is when we save and publish, Dubert now emails all the people, creates this unique sign-up page. You can see it's tied to this particular transport for my organization, so you can have as many as you want. And then the organization or the volunteers come out and they sign up. So we help to manage your run sheet and all those other kinds of things for you. So really tried to do what we can to automate as much as possible. And that's what I have to share, Stacy.
Great. I've got a couple of follow-up questions, and then we'll switch things over to Dr. Lynn, who is waiting in the wings.
Okay.
But there are still a couple more questions here. How many people per organization can have access to setting up transports? Say one does the long distance, another does medical.
Sure. Yeah, you can, every organization owner, so the person that creates the organization, can extend their privileges to as many other people as they want, and they can choose what permissions they have to create transports, edit them, add animals, etc.
Okay, great. And one of our attendees from Canada is checking things out, and she doesn't see a drop-down option for provinces. So how does one view Ontario? Is a quick question there.
That's a good question. That was one I will write down to take a look at because.
Okay, I'll send along the contact information. I'll send her your contact information, and then you guys can connect on the Canada thing.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. And then there's eagerness to get PetPoint linked in. That has been mentioned in here too.
Yep, me too.
Which you said was on your list of things to do. So that's great. And that's about it. It looks like that's covering most of the questions. Everybody seems to be very interested in this, and I highly, highly recommend that you go in, you check it out, get involved. Now, Chris, did you mention that you also have an association, Animal Rescue Professionals Association, that you run too?
Yes. So the ARPA, as you said, animalrescueprofessionals.org. So we've got a series of podcasts. So I learned from Stacy. So we've got Professionals in Animal Rescue podcasts, and we actually just started 2 more where we're featuring an Animal Rescue of the Week and an Animal Shelter of the Week. And so the idea and the goal for the ARPA is to provide certifications and education and obviously to raise awareness to animal rescue.
That's great.